I was an executive. I worked in media organizations in New York, and I did not feel comfortable telling my bosses what I was going through. I felt it would impact my opportunities. I was working on longer term projects, and, I felt that my assignments would change. I wouldn't be given the same opportunities if they knew I was trying to have a baby and then would be out on maternity leave. And I just felt it was important to keep it a secret. And that really elevated the stress.
Stop the bell. Welcome to Mama What's Next, your career podcast for mums. This is our space to be brave, real, and authentic, and to really celebrate that. This podcast is all about trusting our inner voice and following the path that truly lights us up. Because let's be honest, life is too short to settle for anything less than your passion. I'm your host, Melly. Thank you so much for being here. Today I'm honored to sit down with Lia de Feo, a truly remarkable woman who has turned profound loss into a purposeful mission. Lia opens up to me about her journey through child loss and how it has shaped her path towards helping women navigate infertility, loss, parenting, and healing. Through creativity and spirituality, Lia's work empowers those facing similar struggles to find their own path to healing. Let's dive into this important conversation with Lia de Feo. Thanks for listening. Thank you, Lia, for coming to speak to me today.
I'm really appreciative of you reaching out and spending time together. Thank you.
So you, from what I know, you work with fertility and you're a fertility specialist. There's a particular path that made you work in this area that, working with women through, their motherhood, path to motherhood, and also grief and all the challenges that come with it. And I think we both believe in the power of storytelling. And today I would like to tell your story to my listeners. And yes, how, from what I've read and heard about you before, what was your path to motherhood like, and why, did you always want to be a mother, and why was that important to you?
Sure. So I grew up in a big Italian-American family. So, being a woman, having kids was like just what happened, right? And I grew up with a mother who had a career, but she actually gave up her career when I was born, and then had two brothers. And so motherhood and raising a family was just a given. It was something that I thought about all the time. I wanted to be a mom. Like there was just no doubt that motherhood was going to be something that was part of my life. And raising a family, for me, life wouldn't feel complete if I wasn't raising a family. It was something that just was ingrained and was something I was really looking forward to. When I was growing up, I would save these pieces of jewelry that I was felt connected to. Like I had this watch that was from Pinocchio and it told time, and I still have it in my jewelry box. And my daughter's learning to tell time this year, and she will be wearing that watch, right? It's these things that I just always knew I wanted to be a mom. And I also grew up in the 80s and 90s, and it was a time where women, the message was Dolly Parton, 9 to 5, working girl, women could have it all. You could be a mom and you could have a career. And that is what I saw for myself. And my path to motherhood was nothing like I imagined or expected. It was full of grief. And that wasn't an emotion that I ever associated with motherhood.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So tell me more about your journey. Like basically what happened? Because there's been several things that happened along the way.
Yeah.
That you had to, go through and experience.
Yeah, many things. And, it just started with, you grow up and in middle school, they talk to you about, sex ed and how people get pregnant. And, you just think you have sex, you get pregnant, and you have a baby, right? Like that's just what I thought. So the first challenge for us was my husband and I got married when I was 35. So, according to my OB, I was old, and it wasn't easy. We, started trying having unprotected sex, and month after month, I was on top of tracking. When was I ovulating, taking pregnancy tests, and it wasn't working. And I just expected it would work. I did have PCOS. So my doctor, my OBGYN had said, that is something that could get in the way. So after a while of trying, we went to a fertility clinic, and we, long story short, did IUI, which is intrauterine insemination. And again, I thought, okay, now we've got the help we need. We'll do this IUI thing and we'll get pregnant. That's what you do. You go to the fertility clinic, the doctor helps you, you get pregnant. And it didn't work. It didn't work. And, just, I think a lot of people talk about, oh, well, we'll just do fertility treatments, right? But there's really, I think, not enough conversation or understanding about what it really takes, how hard it really is. So I was working at the time, and even navigating when you're doing fertility treatments, you have to go to the doctor in the morning often. And so it's like trying to get that appointment in before I had to be at work, and it just added to the stress. And the first time we did IUI, it's really hopeful. I was like, okay, great. I'm getting the call from the nurse about the pregnancy test today. I'm nervous, but I believed it was going to work. And I think that's one of the things about me that's great. I always have this like positivity and this hope. And it's also one of the things about me that's naive, like I always believe things are going to work out, and it didn't. And I got the call, and I was at work, and I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it didn't work. And at that time, I thought, gosh, this is just the worst thing. We've been trying for so long. And then
How long was it by that time that you had to like experience that?
it was about a year and a half after
Oh
we
my
had gotten
God.
married, which might not seem that long, but because my husband and I were older, we had been,
Yeah.
trying pretty much since we had gotten married, or at least not, not actively trying not to get
Mm.
pregnant.
Hmm.
So it was, again, very naive of me to think, it didn't work, and it's been so long, and now, oh my gosh, like I thought we were going to have our baby in 9 months, and now we have to start over. So it was actually about the third cycle of IUI that we finally got pregnant. And in between the first and the third, I did everything. I did acupuncture, I listened to meditations, I went down to Chinatown, I got these herbs from a traditional Chinese medicine doctor, and I drank them morning and night, and they just looked like a bag of dirt, and they tasted so bad. But a friend of mine had said it worked for her, so I would do anything to get pregnant.
Mm.
And I did. And it was honestly, the most incredible feeling. It really, really, really was. It was one of the highest highs of my life. And just seeing that pregnancy test in 2 lines, and wow, like we were just beyond. And I had a great pregnancy. It was fantastic. I felt great. I felt very, very connected to my baby, and in a way that talked to the baby. I loved when I felt the baby move. But my son, he arrived stillborn, and it was awful. I hadn't even thought of having a stillborn son as an outcome that was a possibility. I didn't know anyone who had had a stillborn. I felt very unprepared, very confused. It was an emergency C-section. My uterus had ruptured. So I was also in very bad shape. I was so lucky. I was close to a hospital. A doctor saved my life. ER doctor really is amazing, and I'm here today because of him. But my husband and I didn't know what to do. The nurses brought us our son, and we held him, and thank goodness my husband thought to take pictures, but it was all very overwhelming and confusing. And at the same time that he was stillborn, I learned that I could no longer carry. My uterus had was still inside me. It was sewn up, which was good. I wouldn't go through menopause early, but I couldn't carry another child. And so it was this loss of our son and this loss of my ability to carry. And so just, we were, we were just broken. Like it was just a horrible, horrible feeling.
To be honest, like I can't even imagine what like the feelings that you have described about this beautiful, amazing, connected pregnancy that you felt great and everything. I can really relate to that because I had that with my daughter, and I just, like it's. I can't even imagine like the pain you would have had to go through to experience like at that end point when you actually, is that something that they like that just happened in the moment, or did they actually then prepare you for that like beforehand? Did they actually say to you, oh, like you'll have to, did they, was it a checkup that you found out, or were
Oh
you
no. So, about 10 days before my uterine rupture, I went to the doctor because I was having a stinging pain right here, a
right?
stinging pain. And
Okay.
I felt it was very unusual. And so I went to the doctor, and unfortunately, my regular OB wasn't in that day. So I saw a different doctor and I explained, what was going on. And the doctor was very dismissive. The baby is getting bigger, there's not as much room. This is what happens. You seem very anxious. Go home and meditate. You're going to be fine. And then to make me feel better, they did an ultrasound. They showed me the baby and they said, look, your baby is in there. They're moving. Like, you're fine. Just chill out. Go home. And I did. And the pain persisted, and I didn't feel like comfortable calling again or asking the doctor again, because it just felt like, gosh, I'm just, I just have to deal with this. Like, this is what pregnancy is. Pregnancy is uncomfortable. I get these pains. It's just what it is. Maybe the baby's foot is in this weird position. And so I think that really goes back to something that I've learned during my journey, which is that you really have to advocate for yourself. As a woman, if you believe something is going on with your body, and it doesn't even have to be with pregnancy, it can be with anything, don't accept that a doctor that dismisses you, get another opinion, go back in, be the squeaky wheel.
Mhm.
That's something that I didn't feel comfortable doing, and I've since learned it's really important. And again, it's not just pregnancy, it's women's medicine overall. It's
Yeah.
really important, I think, that people know that message.
Yeah, I think just in general, not even with health related things. I think in general, women have a problem. Like, and I know this for myself. That's why I
Mhm.
think I also like this story is important. Because you intuitively maybe you felt there was something wrong.
I did.
And somebody dismissed you. In that moment. And if you would have trusted that voice more and trusted yourself more to speak up, which we're often we've been, you know, programmed not to do that. And so we have to relearn that for ourselves, to advocate for ourselves.
Definitely. And I was doing all the things. I was going to, the pregnancy exercise class. I was walking every day. And these were things that, because of what ultimately caused my rupture, I should have been on bed rest. And if I was on bed rest, I probably would have had a different outcome. So when that happened, the thing that for me got me through it is something that again I've learned is really important, and it was turning to welcome support and take help. And I also think as women, it's sometimes hard for us to take help. We're always the caregivers. We're always the ones, helping others. And so when I was in the hospital, I reached out to a friend. She is a cancer survivor and she had a hysterectomy and she had her child through surrogacy. And I really didn't know much about surrogacy, but I knew that that's how she started her family. And the doctor had told me that, my eggs were intact. There was nothing, that would prevent me from taking that path. And so I had conversations with her from the hospital bed, and it was like this little bright light of hope during such a dark time, that okay, my path wasn't over. There was something I could do. I could become a mother. And a lot of people, when they hear my story, they ask me, well, why didn't you just adopt? Why not just adopt in that moment? And I think adoption is absolutely beautiful and a very valid way for people to start their families. For me, I actually had at the time 11, I think, an 11-year-old stepdaughter. And to me, having a stepdaughter was very much like adopting. You welcome a child into your life and you love them and you care for them, but they're not your biological child. And I just, as I said, from a very long age, had this dream of motherhood. And the dream I had was having a biological child that, had my traits within them. And so it was talking to my friend. It was at the advice of my OBGYN, talking to a grief therapist. And that is something that made an enormous difference. We also, my husband and I together went to some therapy sessions, some like support group sessions. One was at the local hospital. And it was very good is the wrong word, but it was knowing that I wasn't the only one that went through this, because in the moment I felt like I was, but knowing that others had been through this and come out on the other side, I needed to know that. I needed to know that years down the line, things would be different and I wouldn't feel like I felt in that moment. So we really sought a lot of help and support. And again, I think when people go through these things in that moment, they don't know what to do. And I think the other problem is people in their lives who really want to help them don't know how to help them, because if they haven't been in that situation, it's really hard for them to know.
Yeah, it's very hard. I think it's very hard to relate to that level of pain you had to go through, really. Because like, yeah, as I said, it's just unimaginable to think that you're on such a high and then you're dropping. Like, I mean, it really is like, how do you help someone? How are you there for someone? Support? Like, is it just even listening? Like, if even, somebody might, there's obviously a lot of women that also that I know that have lost their their children, but in an earlier stage than,
Yes.
and so, but still, like, that also is obviously a grief, and often you don't know how to even,
Yeah,
be there for them, what to do. Like, you don't want to say the wrong thing, you don't want to,
of course. And I
or
think,
it's
yeah, it's a really hard thing. And first and foremost, like you said, it's being there for them. It's,
mm,
being someone they can talk to, being a shoulder they can cry on. And in that moment, some people will say, what should I do? Help me. Where do I go? And for those people, I think it's great to help them know the resources that exist. There are, and I didn't know these at the time. And there are, support groups you can join that are very specific for people that have had stillbirths. And so there's an organization called Star Legacy. They do a lot of work with families that have experienced this. If people are religious, going to speak to, their priest or their, rabbi or whoever's important in their lives. Spirituality can be really important for people. And sometimes, reading books of others that have been through it. And, there are so many books out there that are really helpful and help. Again, some people want to talk to others, some people want to go inward. And I think the biggest thing is, in the beginning, people who go through this, there's usually a lot of outreach that friends and family do. But in the months that follow, the support tends to kind of go away, because people just kind of, it's not as acute, and people can forget. So I think it's great to, check in with that person in a few months, in 6 months, in a year. For me, one of the things I appreciate greatly is friends and family that remember, the anniversary of when our son was born and died, and say, hey, thinking about you today. That means so much. So, put the date in your calendar of what happened to your friend and reach out to them on that date. Just say you're thinking about them. It just means a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. I can imagine. Yeah. Yeah. It's,
Yeah, you want to feel like their life mattered, right?
yeah.
Like they made an impact, their life mattered. And we'll talk about it, I know, later, but that's a big reason why I do what I do today, to honor
Yes.
my son and also my daughter. So that was my first tragedy
Yes.
in becoming a mother. And we went down the path of surrogacy, which in New York State at the time was incredibly complex because it was illegal, actually. Surrogacy was illegal in New York, and I know it
Mm.
is illegal in many places in Europe today.
Yes, actually, I had a friend in Germany that also did it and is not allowed there. They had to go to, I think it's a Spanish island or,
Hmm.
and yeah, found someone elsewhere. Yeah.
Yeah, in the US, it's state by state.
Mm.
Now, I believe Louisiana is the only state that does not allow it. Some states it's outwardly legal, and in other states it's kind of not talked about, which allows it to
Mm.
happen. Um, in New York at the time, like I said, it was illegal, and so that meant we hired a agency in Boston. New York clinics wouldn't work with us for IVF, so we had to go to Connecticut for IVF and travel. And again, when you go through IVF, it's not just like take some medicine and, get your eggs removed. It's a very long process of, evaluating your body and your hormone levels. And, your doctor works with you individually to come up with a, medical regimen that is going to give you the most success. So, going to Connecticut and having to be there, almost daily for many weeks was very hard, very hard.
Ho- Yeah, how do you do? And I wanted to ask this before as well, because you mentioned obviously that also that goes on for a while, right? For quite some time, you have to stick to this particular program, if we call it that. And how do you manage that with work? Like, how do women even manage that level of stress and anxiety? And in your case, like, what was your work like at the time? And was there support? Was there understanding? Did they even know? Like, do workplaces even know when women are going through that? Like, how?
Yeah. So I think the good news is that at least I think here in the US, the conversation is starting to change. There's been a lot of news and media around family building with the
Mm,
overturn of Roe versus Wade and with IVF being a really important thing. I don't know if everybody knows, but there was a situation that happened in Alabama in February of this year where essentially IVF clinics were forced to shut their doors because the state legislature voted that the embryos that are used in IVF and are actually considered humans and have the same life as human babies. And because of that, providers, and this is a big movement that's going on right now in the US, it just came to light in Alabama. And because of that, people were in the middle of their cycle, and fertility clinics had to shut their doors because they were afraid of criminalization because it would be considered murder to, fertilize eggs and then not use them all or, discard eggs in the process. And so we had these families that had waited for years and spent tens of thousands of dollars and were in the middle of their cycles, and everything came to a screeching halt, and it was really awful. So in the US, that situation has really brought to light a lot of awareness of IVF, and I think the good thing is about kind of the emotions behind it and
mm,
how when somebody, gets to the point where they're going through fertility treatments, that's not how they want to have a baby. They're doing it because there's a problem and they've been down a
yeah.
really hard road. So when I was doing this and going through this at the time, I was an executive. I worked in media organizations in New York, and I did not feel comfortable telling my bosses what I was going through. I felt it would impact my opportunities. I was working on longer term projects, and I felt that my assignments would change. I wouldn't be given the same opportunities if they knew I was trying to have a baby and then would be out on maternity leave. And I just felt it was important to keep it a secret. And that really elevated the stress. Because again, I was, going to these appointments in the morning, trying to get in on time. And now I think there's more openness to it. There's more of a chance for people to go to, if not their boss, then their HR team and say, like, I'm going through something medical, I'm going to need to adjust my hours. I'm going to need to, come in late, and I'm happy to stay late, or whatever the situation is. It's, I think, better, but it's not where it needs to be by any stretch.
Yeah, because I imagine it would be very, very stressful, like being in this situation and then having to, that's why I asked the question, like having to hide that from your employer. And if I, remember, I've been lucky to work with companies even in the last few years where it was quite flexible working hours always. But I know that there's a lot of places where it's still not like that. And
Right.
people are counting your hours, and they're making sure that you're always there, on time. And it's like, oh my God, if I just think like a woman, it's, like, would you even say it to tell your employer to say that, you're going through that for fertility treatments? Or would you even just say, I have a medical issue and that's why, just to take that edge off? Or would you be very transparent?
I think it depends on where you're at. I think it
Mm,
is so situational that there isn't a answer that works for every situation, because
yeah.
it's who your boss is, what your company is like, what your work is like. These days a
Mm,
lot of companies are working remote. It's a little easier to dial into a meeting while you're in a waiting room, right? Like, so I think
mm,
it's very individual, and it very much
mm,
depends on what
mm,
is happening with each person. But there are changes coming. There are states that are passing laws about having to give pregnant women time off for doctor's appointments, like things that are, didn't exist
mm.
a while ago. So I think
Yeah.
it's important that also people are aware of their company policy as well as the policy of the place in which they live, and they have to make the best decision they can based on all those factors.
Mhm.
I didn't feel I could tell my company. I didn't feel I could tell my boss. But in every instance, for me, there was actually somebody on my team that I really trusted. Like in each instance, it was a woman who, one of them was a woman who was a mom, knew, how much I wanted to be a mom, and kind of covered for me. If I was late, it was, oh, her train is delayed or she's on her way, right? So I had an advocate in a teammate at work kind of at all times, so that
Mhm.
I had a bit of a cover, bit of a backup.
Yeah. Yeah. So see, we do need each other. It's
We
like
do. We
we
really
do
do.
need to support and help each other through this, Yeah.
Yes,
Through anything really, but even here,
for sure.
very obvious. So Leah, what happened then? Like once you found out about your options and
Yeah, so we did IVF. We actually did multiple rounds. So again, I thought, oh, you do IVF, you get your embryos, and we're good, right? So I thought in my head the timeline was like, okay, in a few months we're gonna, be ready to go, and that wasn't the case. Also, I knew nothing about surrogacy at all. And so I learned that it can take, at the time, it took 6 months to a year to be matched with a surrogate. Honestly, now it's longer. I think there's a lot more awareness of surrogacy as an option these
Mhm.
days. And it can be longer for a match from an agency. And so we explored everything. We looked at overseas surrogacy, which is a lot more affordable. But at the end of the day, we decided to work with an agency because we wanted this team of professionals to rely on. But also, it's a very unregulated industry. And it's an industry that for many there's a lot of pushback against surrogacy. And I think a lot of it is valid, and it is, there's a perception that people with means take advantage of women without means and are essentially, paying them for their body. And I think that's very much a valid concern.
Mhm.
And so for us, working with a surrogacy agency meant that the agency was screening women to make sure that they weren't doing surrogacy to pay their mortgage, to put groceries on the table, that they were financially stable before they, were decided to do surrogacy, and that they were essentially doing it for, the right reasons. And we were introduced to our surrogate through our agency. We wrote a letter, to our future surrogate. She wrote a letter to us, and we read it, and we're just really couldn't believe someone like this existed in the world. Someone like this who had just a beautiful. She actually was a mother of two, really great mom, and she also had done surrogacy before. And she did surrogacy for a same-sex couple. And what I've come to learn is a lot of surrogates prefer to carry for a same-sex couple because they actually don't bring any baggage to the relationship. They just need a uterus. They don't have a uterus. So that's it's the emotions and the stakes are not quite as high. And so with us, our agency matched us with this wonderful woman because they felt that she really would just be a great match for us, but also because she had done it before. She had been through the surrogacy process before. She knew it, and that would make us feel more comfortable, just kind of where we were coming from. So she lives in Kentucky, and so we flew her up to New York for her medical treatments, met her husband. They're wonderful. And the first time we met on Zoom, it was actually really like awkward and uncomfortable. Like we were all so nervous. And it's really, I, in my life, am a little bit controlling.
Yes.
And so to be able to give the most important thing in the world,
Right.
your embryo to another person to carry your baby is like
That level of trust
level of
to give.
trust
Yeah.
of someone who's essentially a stranger.
Yes.
You've read a little about them, you've met them, you've been assured by your agency that they're going to, be great. But at the end of the day, they live in a different state, and it's, you're trusting them to do something incredibly important. And we got so lucky. She was truly, and is truly, an amazing person. And she was so mindful of what we were navigating. She made sure to schedule her appointments when I could. My husband came to some of them, but I was at every single appointment, FaceTimed in, so that, I could hear what the doctor was saying, ask questions, and just be as engaged in the pregnancy from afar as we could. And we went down to Kentucky for the 20-week ultrasound, and that was really beautiful. And we met her extended family, her kids, her parents, and just really saw what her life was about. And it was wonderful, but I was also holding my breath. We had lost our son at the very end. And so for her, it was like, this is great. I feel great. Everything's fine. Don't worry. We got this. And for me, it was, well, let's get past, the milestone where our son was stillborn, and then maybe I'll be able to feel more comfortable. And we never got there. It was one of those doctor's visits where she was going to FaceTime us, and I was at work. It was actually the week between Christmas and New Year's. And my door was closed, and I was waiting for this call, and it didn't come through. And I texted my husband, and I said, something's wrong. Something is wrong. She always, if she's late, she texts. If she texts, she says, the doctor's running late, or, Wi-Fi is spotty at the hospital, but she didn't say anything. He's like, don't worry. She probably forgot her phone in the car. Like, everything's fine. It's fine. And I was like, oh no, it's not fine. There is something going on. Like, this is just unlike her. This is not how she has operated at any point in this pregnancy. And sure enough, maybe about an hour after she was supposed to call, my phone rang, but it wasn't her. It was a maternal fetal medicine specialist who said, you need to get to Kentucky as soon as possible. Your child has an irregular heartbeat, and we're not quite sure what's wrong, but you really need to come down here. We're going to be doing some tests, and this was around noon, I would say. And they said, let's meet in the hospital first thing in the morning. So that's what we did. We obviously just dropped everything and got on a flight. And the next morning we learned our daughter had a large growth in her heart. And over the course of about 2 weeks of trying to do everything we possibly could, and not just us or surrogate, it was hard for all of us. She had wanted a very natural birth, and we were supportive of whatever she wanted. And now here she was in the hospital, hooked up to all these machines, being asked to take all these medications that, it was up to her whether she took them. It's her body, it's her, and she was just so willing and so in it with us and wanting to have this positive outcome. We were there all the time. We had, we tried to make her room as comfortable as possible, set up lit the little battery powered candles, and got a Reiki healer in, and just did anything we could do. But at the end of the day, our daughter arrived via C-section, and she passed away 2 hours later. And it was an incurable heart condition, and there was nothing and no outcome that could have been different. There was no way to save her. And it was like absolute rock bottom. Like, just here's the second time we were so hopeful and really believing that this was, nervous and worried. But at the same time, we had just, I can't even express how challenging and, heartbreaking it was to have her pass away. And, surrogacy and IVF are a fortune, and we had used all of our savings. And so we kind of felt that was the end of the road. And that was, where our path was going to end.
Wow. Yeah. That is just like, I can't even imagine. How old was she at the time when that happened? So
How many weeks along? She was
yeah,
29 weeks along. Yeah.
so tiny
Yeah.
still also.
And one thing so you learn from everything you go through. And the first time when Christopher died, my husband had taken this one picture, and it remains like the picture of our son that we have. And then when we knew that our daughter, we named her Avelina, and we knew it means little bird. And, she was here with us and then flew away. And, we knew that she wasn't going to make it. That was just something, we knew that. And so there's an organization called Now I Lay Me Down to Sleep. And they send photographers to the hospital to take what they call memory photos, or memory portraits, I think. But essentially, these photographers are on standby, and, we reached out to the organization, and within hours they had a photographer waiting with us for our daughter to come, from the operating room where our surrogate was having a C-section, come to us. And I'm so grateful for those photos. We have those photos. They're professional photos. They're just, the only photos we have with her. And the photographer was amazing because they were there, but they weren't there. They were like in the background. Like, they weren't getting in our way. They were letting us be with our daughter. And, because she was alive for about 2 hours. And so photographer wasn't there the whole time, but when they were, it was great. And we're grateful to have those photos. So that's something that, we didn't know at the time. So for anyone who's listening, that, someone calls them and says like, hey, I'm going to be delivering this baby, the baby's not going to make it, look into that, because they are across the US. They are national.
Yeah. Yeah, I think most people don't even know that something like this exists, right? And
Oh, yeah.
it's probably the last thing you even think of in a moment like this.
And hospitals don't know. Like, hospitals, generally speaking, don't know. Like, neither hospital had suggested that to us. So certainly not the first hospital, but the second time we knew about it. And it was because our grief therapist had just talked about it with us, and, we knew it. So yeah, there are organizations out there, but you just, like, the first time we didn't even know it existed, didn't know it was out there.
I can't even like if I just if I just even for a second imagine what that would feel like, I just I couldn't.
So hard. Yeah.
It's
And
so
not just,
hard and unimaginable.
and we lost, our daughter, but also this, we were in it with our surrogate and
Mm,
with her whole
mm,
family, her kids. Like, she was obviously very
yeah,
pregnant.
yeah.
Her kids knew about it. Her community knew about it. It
Mm,
was
mm,
our loss, but it was her loss, and it has
yeah,
changed her life as well. And it's, we're just devastated and trying to heal, but also very mindful of how is she doing. And
mm,
I think having the surrogacy agency to help guide us, they have social workers that we spoke to, all along, and they were able to help guide us. They were able to help guide her. And so, again, a lot of people will do surrogacy without an agency, and that's totally valid, and you can do that.
mm,
But when something goes wrong, it was really just, I was so grateful to have this resource that was able to help us
yeah.
and also help her during that
To
time.
support, that whole. How do you even like when you I imagine like in this time, like you would have been so hopeful and celebrating that everything that happened every step of the way, and that just tears you apart. And then on top of that, what you said before, like that that must have been even worse, like thinking, oh my god, like now our finances are also,
Oh, yeah.
you know
So hard. I think, I guess I was having a hard time kind of celebrating the milestones. And it was
mm,
something that my husband and I had continued to see our grief therapist, and
yeah,
she specialized in infant loss. So she was like really fantastic. And
yeah,
men and women really do process these things very differently, especially with our stillbirth, because with our son, he was in my body, and I felt this just deep, deep connection to him. And although
yeah,
my husband was by my side and in it with me every step of the way, he just had a very different relationship
yeah,
to the pregnancy. And, then we went in to do the surrogacy, and we just, our approach and how we handled the emotions of it was quite different. And it was so great to have this, professional guiding us and helping
yeah,
us with it. So I had a hard time celebrating during our surrogacy. I actually was like nervous during every milestone. And our grief therapist told us, look, if you don't celebrate each milestone, you're cheating
mm,
yourself. Because at the end of the day, if your child is born healthy, you missed all these moments to celebrate and all these moments of joy. And if your child is born and something is wrong, you're going to
mm,
be just as devastated whether you celebrated or you didn't.
mm,
So go ahead
mm,
and celebrate, you
yeah,
know? And I tried, I really did. But it was
yeah,
hard. It was hard. I
yeah,
was nervous the whole time.
yeah, yeah,
So after that, my husband and I really tried to accept life without a child of our own and think about, what would this mean for our life? And, our daughter was, I want to say, my stepdaughter was 13 at the time. And so we were like, look, we'll be, empty nesters soon enough. We won't have the responsibility of raising a young child.
mm,
That's a really different kind of life, different than we expected. And, we really, we did think about adoption. We learned it was just as expensive and just as challenging as surrogacy, which is just sad, because I think that, that's a whole different topic, but it's not easy to adopt a child. And at the end of the day, we did feel that adoption, like I said before, was very much like having my stepdaughter. And for a while, we
mm,
just were, that was it. Like, we were It was the end. It was the end. And my husband came to me and said, "You're not yourself. Like, this is really impacting you." And he said, well, okay, I should back up. The first thing I learned is I had a new job. And at that job, we had IVF benefits, and that was very unusual for the time. So our company the company I worked for was going to cover one round of IVF. And they also had a surrogacy stipend, which was completely unheard of. And they were going to, give us money. If, it certainly wouldn't cover the whole journey. I learned we could borrow against our 401k. We kind of were looking at all these different options. And my husband said, "Look, you are not yourself. And I'm afraid that years down the road, if we don't try this one more time now," I was 40 at the time. "If we don't try this one more time now, we're going to look back and say, we should have tried it when you were 40, when we had the chance. And so let's try it. I think it's going to have a huge impact on our life, on our marriage, on our relationship, if we don't just give this one more try." And we did. We did IVF one more time, covered by work, and it only took one round to make an embryo. And that's another thing about IVF that maybe people don't know, which is that the doctors learn more and more about how your body reacts to the medicine, like through every cycle, and so they get kind of more intelligent about how to manage your cycles and your medication. So we created an embryo, and then we needed help to fund it. We just did. And so we were just so fortunate and privileged to have family that was able to help us. And, between that and the surrogacy stipend and loans, and just we cobbled it together, and we went back to our agency, and they were incredible. They actually offered to waive all of their fees for our second round. We still, paid our surrogate what they should have gotten, of course, but the agency itself had waived all of their fees, and we were matched with a surrogate, this time in Utah. And again, just this amazing, amazing woman who had her own family and also had carried before. And that journey I was honestly a little bit more disconnected from that journey. I had a really hard time just being in, like, during our first surrogacy, we did a weekly call with our surrogate, and we were on every Sunday. We got on with them, and I couldn't do that this time. And it was just because I had so much anxiety and so much worry. And so she was really understanding of that. We did a lot of texting. We called from time to time. I did still join every doctor's appointment, but I had to remove myself just for like a little bit of protection in a way. And our daughter arrived, and she unbelievably was, healthy and beautiful, and it just felt very surreal. And I remember a few hours after she arrived, our surrogate was in run room recovering. We were in the room next door, and my husband and I were looking over our daughter, and we looked up, and he said, like, just what I was thinking, like as if we were like telepathic. He said, "I am so glad we didn't give up." And, in that moment, it was just amazing. And I think, going through everything we went through makes us just really appreciative parents, and maybe have more patience with, some of the things. Raising kids is hard. It's really hard work. It's really hard work. And I think that, maybe I'm just a little bit more, I don't know, a little bit more patient than I would otherwise be, because I'm just so grateful that she's here.
Yeah, I think that's something we need to remind ourselves of. Even, in my case, like that was another path of challenging, but very, very different. And we do have to remind ourselves of, that it's a miracle, it's a miracle they're here and they've chosen us, I think.
Yes, I believe that very strongly.
I really believe that. My daughter actually even said that to me when.
Really?
Yes, she did. Like
So
she
beautiful.
she once said this to me because we were talking about her dad, and I said, I picked a good father for you, a good dad, I think, even if he's not always with us. And she's like, no, 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 Mama, I picked him. I picked you and me, you and
Oh,
him.
love that. How old was she when she said that to you?
That must have been like, well, 7 now. Yeah, it was actually a few months ago. Seven, yeah, six and
Wow.
a half. Yeah,
Oh my
7.
gosh,
Yeah.
that's so beautiful.
Mm,
There's a book
yeah.
that I recommend to people who are spiritual and who
Yeah.
believe in this, and I do.
I do too.
Part of what I did during all these really challenging times was I worked with a spiritual life coach. She's a medium and a spiritual life coach, and that
Yes.
really helped me feel connected to the spirits of Christopher and Avelina, and really, I believe, help welcome Carolina, my daughter, into this world. There's
Yeah.
a book called Spirit Babies.
Yes. Spirit babies.
It's really beautiful.
I'll have to look it up. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's about communicating with the baby you're meant to have. And a lot of, I have a lot of clients in the space who are navigating infertility, navigating loss,
Hmm.
and those who are open to it, I suggest they read the book because I think it's a really beautiful thought that there are these spirits and they choose
Yeah.
us and they want to be
Yes.
here with us in
Yes.
this world.
Yes. I think so too. I really think so. And in your case, basically what happened, afterwards, like you had Carolina, and how old is she now?
She's 6. She's here. I
She's 6,
have
so
a
they're
little
almost
picture
the
of her.
same
Isn't
age.
she the cutest?
Beautiful. I
She's
think I
6.
saw her in one of your posts when she was proudly standing, and I was like, oh. It's a beautiful age. I think it's like every age as they get older and older, and always I think, oh my god, this is so amazing. Don't let this pass. I just want to stop time. I think every mother that's like really present and loves that
Yes.
motherhood journey I have moments when it's really hard, when I just want to stop the time, and it makes me actually really sad when you realize, oh my god, they're growing
Yeah.
up. I don't want her to grow up.
I completely agree. Carolina started first grade, and I remember first grade. It's like, a grade that I have a lot of memories of. And I'm like, oh, how can she be this old?
I know. How where's the time gone, right?
That's the
Like,
thing. Where is the time gone? And in a lot of ways, I'm grateful because it gets easier now. I think motherhood is getting a little easier now that she's more independent and, she's in school later and she can,
mhm,
dress
yeah,
herself and brush her own teeth and, do more of the things.
yeah.
So, it's sad to see her growing up in a way because I want it to stop,
Mhm.
but it's also beautiful. And,
Yes.
I think it makes motherhood a little bit easier. But, I have a stepdaughter and I know the hard years are just coming back. It's a cycle.
Mhm. Yes, yes. Well, yeah.
We have tough teenage years ahead. I know those are coming.
You know what's coming. I always think about myself, and then I go, oh, she's only half of that, and we're in for a wild ride.
Yes.
Leah, what happened afterwards? But work-wise, you've actually worked. You had an executive position beforehand, but obviously you're working, with women parents now in this field, supporting parents and women, you know, on their path to motherhood. And what happened? Like, why did you
Yeah.
end up? Why did you decide you should talk about your journey and what happened? Not
Um,
everybody would do that, I think.
yeah. So I
So.
think in some ways it actually connects back to the spirituality we were talking about
Mm,
because I really felt that there had to be a reason this happened. Why did I lose Christopher? Why did we lose Avelina? Why? Can
mm,
I make something positive, out of this pain? Can I turn it into something? And the first thing I did was actually, I really wanted to help people figure out how to navigate surrogacy because I felt very grateful that I had a friend that I could turn to. And so the first thing I did was connect with an advocacy organization that was working on legalizing surrogacy in New York State. And I connected with someone and wound up going to Albany, the New York State capital, and speaking and sharing my story and sharing it and meeting with politicians in Albany to put a human everyday face to surrogacy and why people need it and why having it be illegal was making it so much harder. There were also celebrity voices with me. So I was sitting at a table alongside Andy Cohen and Michelle Bateau and Reshma Sajani and people that kind of were, big names, and the politicians they were the buzzy people. It was exciting to meet them, but I was kind of the everyday person. And we had a surrogate was with us as well. And just the human side of understanding surrogacy, because like I said, it can be very divisive for people, and understanding how important it is to help people grow families. And also the New York legislation was really protecting surrogates as well and making sure that there were regulations in place. So my first experience was getting involved, and the bill passed and surrogacy was legalized, and it just felt so great to be a part of this change and making it easier for others. And then I wound up getting a life coaching certification, and I started to do coaching and helping people that were, at first I was very surrogacy focused and helping people who had been told that there was, no way they were going to be able to carry a pregnancy, to figure out how to navigate. I also worked with same-sex couples. Sometimes I worked with couples. Sometimes I just worked with individuals. And then through that work, I've gone back and forth. At times I've been exclusively doing that. I've been doing some business consulting. It's the kind of thing that is so rewarding, but doesn't always pay the bills.
Yes.
So it's kind of a mix of my professional world and doing this as well. I really want to move more and more into this world and, even have my professional life, be a part of the fertility world. And so through doing surrogacy, I wound up just through word of mouth, connecting with people that weren't necessarily looking for surrogacy, but that had experienced losses and that just didn't know where to go or where to turn to. And it was really rewarding to be able to help these people. And I think more than anything, having someone to speak to that could understand where they were coming from and help them process and heal and determine how to move forward. And the hard part is there's not always a happy ending for people. There is not always a path of motherhood for someone that wants to be a mom. And that's very, very, very challenging to come to terms with. And again, I'm just so grateful that I was able to have Carolina, but not everybody does. And if you've always dreamed of a life that included a child and you wind up not being able to fulfill that dream, it's a very hard thing. So working with people and having them, find joy in different aspects of their life and have a fulfilling life, having a family is very fulfilling. It's also very hard and very challenging. And so, you can have a very fulfilling life and not be a mother. And, I'm not maybe the best person to, speak to that because I didn't have that experience. But I really try to help people find joy. A lot of it is finding joy through creativity and through gratitude and through figuring out what your path really is. What are you meant to do? What are you on this earth to do and to be? Who are you here to be?
And oftentimes, like what you said before, also, that path, pain to purpose. Sometimes there's a reason why these, I always believe no matter what we want in life, that there sometimes things don't work out. And I believe there's a higher reason why that is the case. And obviously in a case where somebody wants to be a mom and that doesn't come true, it's a very hard thing to accept. But at the same time, maybe there's a reason why that's not meant to happen for you. Maybe things would have happened down the road that that would have been very hard to deal with. You just don't know why. Maybe you're here for other things. That's in your case, obviously that shifted your career quite dramatically, and still, navigating that. And I'm sure, the more you build that out, the, helping women and people through these challenging times, that is something so important to us.
So important. Yeah, I'm working on a
So,
book now, actually. So I'm writing,
wow,
and
that's
there's a lot of books
amazing.
that have helped me. Like I mentioned, one of
Yes,
them, Spirit Babies. But there's a lot of
yeah,
books that helped me. That through reading, I was able to feel connected and
yeah.
feel that there was, there were other people out there that had experienced this, and so. I'm working on a book. I have a literary agent that I'm working with, and my book tells my story, but it really interweaves it with the history of infertility and reproductive rights, because there's a lot that's happening today that actually kind of you can go back to history and look at these things. History often repeats itself, and I think it's very important for us as humanity to be aware of
Mm.
what women have navigated throughout history, and because it influences and impacts where we are today.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. It's not often an easy path, I think, for us, and especially as moms, and we need all the support, and you writing this book, everything that we can get, and especially also supporting each other. So
Yes, very much so.
thank you so much, Lia, for coming today and for speaking. I know we've got a little bit over time, but
Thank you so much for having me.
thank
It
you.
was such a pleasure. You're just really
Yes.
appreciate you. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to tell your story. And I will put all your contact details in the show notes, how people can reach out to you if they want some support or
Sounds great.
anything. Yes. So thank you.
Okay, thank you so much.
All right, hello, and I'm so grateful you were here today, tuning in and showing up for yourself. If you love this episode, can I ask for a quick high five? Yes, that's right, just hit that subscribe button at the top and leave me a review and share this episode with someone who could use a little inspiration today. Your support really means the world. Let's also give ourselves a big hug for showing up, being honest, and supporting each other on this incredible journey. Don't forget to check the show notes for links to connect with me on Instagram and LinkedIn. I'd really love to keep in touch. Until next time, keep being the incredible real you that the world needs. I'll see you back here soon. Bye.